Charlie, lovely stuff. Thanks a million for coming in and talking to us today. So all this is we're delighted to have people like yourself come in and share their stories and share their music and tell us about their life in traditional music. So would you start off by telling us how you got involved in traditional music and accordions in the first place?
Well, I guess I wasn't music in my family, so it was a question of listening to Radio Air and Queally House and some old records at home as well, and that's basically it. You know, just got interested in. As far as accordions go, I think it was there was a program on RT television, Gradam Ceoil, and that was a big influence. Tony McMahon produced or presented it. And he always had a great lineup of musicians, you know. And the tragedy is that I think bar maybe one or two, they've all been lost now. But he used to play one tune, maybe one selection, each program, and that was a huge inspiration for me.
Yeah, so the sound of the accordion caught your ear.
Oh yeah, especially the way he was playing. Yeah.
And. So would there have been people in the area who would have started you off?
Well, I got a bit of help, but it was a tin whistle that I started really, and I kept that going for a long time. But the accordion took, you know, well, it was a single row I played actually first, you know.
Okay, single row melodeon.
Yes. And
how did that come into your hands?
Well, I kind of got a loan of one for a while, and then I went to England then eventually, and I was able to buy one, you know. Okay,
and was there anyone coming to teach you while you were in Limerick, or?
No, not really, no. I did, there was a guy who used to play a bit on whistle and stuff like that, yes. But very little now. I had to kind of find my own way, really.
Okay, so you were influenced by sort of Ciarán McMahon's programmes in the
radio? Yes, and Queally House, and, definitely. Yeah.
And so you moved to England then. Why? What prompted the move to England?
Well, it was work really. Yeah, 1974. Yes.
And what was the music scene like in England?
In London it was fantastic. It really was inspirational. Yeah. It wasn't like anything I'd seen at home, you know. Really, I mean, it was electric, really. Yeah, and. The centre for me was the White Hart in Fulham Broadway, and Raymond Rowland used to play there. He was from Ballyshe, County Galway, and he was a magic player, you know. There was something, it's very hard to describe it, you know, but the combination of the people and the atmosphere and the way he put it across. But Joe Cooley used to come to their house in Ballyshe, and he used to leave the accordion there, and Raymond used to pick it up, you know, when he come back from school and that. And that's how he. So he started on a C-sharp D, but he switched over to B&C eventually. But Joe Cooley was a big influence, I think, and his brother Oliver, younger brother Oliver as well, and they were both great players. And their mother was Lucy Garner from Sligo, from Ballymote. So they had music, and the father was a fiddle player as well, so they had music. They couldn't help it, you know.
So Cooley would have influenced Raymond, and then
oh yes,
that sound of Raymond's box drum, that would have an influence on you when you were in
yes.
London? Yeah.
Oh yes, yes, yes. And there was definitely something of Cooley in his music, you know. Yeah.
And so it was London Irish scene effectively that you were around.
Yeah, for not I worked lived and worked just north of London as well. So you know there wasn't so much. There was an Irish community as well, but not so much. But London was hopping that time, you know. It was.
And who else would have been around at that time? Who were the other?
Old Bobby Casey, Roger Sherlock, John Bowe, Mick O'Connell, and the late, as he's known as the late Mick O'Connell, was around as well, and Johnny Minogue. There was so many. I couldn't even, you know, I'd be leaving out people now. But it was wonderful. PJ Crotty from down Mayasta, and Angela. Sean O'Shea, fiddle player. They'll come back to me slowly, but it was a fantastic time. I don't think it exists now, anything like that now. But,
very, very vibrant scene.
yes, and the dance halls, of course, were full steam ahead as well.
And so at that time, what were the settings where you were meeting up with musicians? Would it have been in the pubs or more often those
yeah, sessions in pubs, yeah. And Camden Township was full of it. Yeah.
And would there have been, people often talk about regional styles, but would there have been a certain London style at that time?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Definitely there was. There was a certain style you could attribute to London Irish, you know, definitely.
And what do you think that was? What contributed to that? A hard question.
That's very difficult to define that now. Just maybe a little up tempo, maybe a little different in the. Just a conglomeration of different styles, I suppose, really. Yeah. Much like New York in a way, even though that was Sligo based, but. There definitely was a sort of melting pot of different.
Yeah, you had people coming from all over. People
from
and Clare and yourself.
Yeah.
And so to talk about I suppose I'll ask you, the Shaskeen Ceilí Band.
Yes.
That came about when you were.
No, I wasn't part of it.
Okay.
No, that was 1970, 71.
Okay.
They started. Benny O'Connor and drummer and Tom Cusson, banjo player, they started a Shaskeen version of in London, but then they came home in around 1970, I'd say, and then they formed the Shaskeen we know of today. P.G. Hernan was the first accordion player. It was a great band, a really fantastic band. Yeah.
And when did you become involved with them?
1981. Yeah.
And so, were you playing in the dance halls in London at the time?
Yes, but not. No, I wasn't playing really before. But when I joined Shaskeen, then we used to go back on tours, and we played all those, the Galtimore, the Hibernian, places like that. There was another one there, I just can't think of the name of now, and there was a revolving stage. So when it was time, there was a house band, so they'd be playing away at the front, and you'd all line up then when it was time to facing back, and then after they'd be played their last tune, and the stage would start to turn. And we'd start playing then, you know, as we came round. That was fun, yeah.
And so, who would have been playing with you for those dances in the dance halls, or would you have been playing with different bands?
No, that was Shaskeen.
That was Shaskeen.
Yeah.
So all the stuff in the dance halls in London would have been done with the Shaskeen, so at a different time.
For me, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
Of course, we toured the whole country in Scotland as well. You know, it'd be long tours, like you could be gone for a long time. Yeah.
And when did you move from the single row to the two row?
Well, I suppose when I went to England, some stage after, yeah.
And what inspired you to pick up the two row?
Well, I actually got hold of a two row that needed work, and I met Raymond Rowland one night, and I asked him, I said, I played a single row, and what way should I get it tuned? And he said C sharp D, so that's why. And it meant very little in terms of adjustment, you know. Whereas if I went to play a B and C, it would be a completely different thing.
Yeah, so you just those few
Yeah,
accidentals.
the D row was the same, you know. Yeah.
And was there something about the C sharp D sound, or was?
Oh yeah, well, of course, Tony McMahon, well, he played a D and D sharp, so he was playing E flat, but he, yeah, and Joe Cooley, of course, I heard Joe Cooley on recordings, but that was an inspiration that to listen to that, you know. Yeah.
Do you fancy playing us another tune?
Oh yeah, well, I can play
Whatever you fancy.
Whichever,
Yeah.
So I suppose the three row or the two row came in then, and I kind of had more flexibility, you know.
Which do you prefer playing now?
They're a completely different instrument, really. I don't, you know, there's tunes I play on that and versions of tunes that I play on that I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't have the same satisfaction playing on this, you know, on this two row.
And just talking about playing for dancers as well, is there one that you
Well,
go to playing for dancers?
I don't use that in the band now, no, in the Tullen, no. I have done it a couple of times. You know, the repertoire is kind of different, and you have no C natural. You have to try and get around that, or you're playing tunes that you can't get around, so you have to put in a C sharp. You know, so to have a band to do all that in the 20s and 30s, they were managing that all right, fine, but that was the only accordions they had. So
It's changed since.
What?
It's changed a bit since then.
oh yes,
Yeah.
oh yes.
Man, Charlie, lovely stuff. So, when you were with the Shaskeen Ceilí, did you make recordings as well? Would you?
Oh yeah, maybe. Well, we made quite a few. Just can't remember exactly how many now, but we did some recordings for set dancing where we just played, whatever sets they were and played all the figures and stuff. So that would have been the last recordings I did with them. But previously that, maybe 4, I can't remember, 4 or 5, I can't remember now.
Yeah. Was that a strange experience going into a recording studio and recording with the Ceilí Band that you would be used to playing for live dancers?
No, it wasn't, because when I joined them, there wasn't the set dancing, revival hadn't happened, So like we used to go around the country, but you'd be going into big lounge bars and there'd be a bit of dancing maybe. And there might be, but here in Clare there was only the Caledonian set really. And in Galway, the Galway set, that was it. You wouldn't find in Kerry stuff, and Tipperary they had their own set there. So it wasn't, there wasn't the way, nowadays, like the sets from all over the place, danced every night, everybody dances, and wasn't like that at all. So we played a lot of Ceilí dances as well, the Siege Innis and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And of course it was more like a cabaret, for want of a better word, I mean, you were doing solos and, there was songs and all that. It was very different. So I think in the late 80s, that's when the revival started, and we were flat out then playing. And all over the country, people were travelling from here to Cork to Kerry, whatever, there was no, distance was no object.
Did you enjoy playing with the band?
Oh yeah, it was a great time, yeah, absolutely. And the amazing thing is, I must be with the Tull about 10 years now. I left the Shaskeen in 1995, I think. So Benny O'Connor was still drumming with them, but then he retired after a few years, and I thought that's it. But amazingly, he had joined the Tulla before I did, so we came back, which was great, So.
And how did that come about? Did you just follow him over to the Tulla, or how did you get?
No, it wasn't that at all. It was just that they kept inviting me to play, and come up and play with them and stuff like that, and I was honoured to do that. And eventually, the accordion player they had, he got out of it anyway. He had enough, I think, and so I took over then. Yeah.
And how is it different playing with the Tulla compared to playing with the Shaskeen?
Well, the fact that Benny and myself were together, I suppose we kind of were like mercenaries. I mean, we kind of put our bit into it, I think the Tulla has the same thing, has its own rhythm. There's no doubt. It's different in that way. Yeah. I enjoyed both for different reasons, I suppose, but there was great camaraderie and, especially tours and away for a long time. And it was great times.
Have you any stories about your travels with either band?
Yes, I'm sure I have. There was one thing happened, and we were booked to play in Drumshanbo. There was I think it was a Toastal festival or something like that. This guy Joe Mooney used to run it, and like going to Leitrim from Galway was quite some drive, that time. And we arrived we were coming into the town, you see, and next minute we saw Joe Mooney coming towards us, and we stopped up anyway and rolled down the window. And Joe says, "Oh, are you passing through?" Jesus, passing through? No, we're supposed to be playing here tonight. No, that's next week, he said. So you can imagine what the atmosphere and that going home for another 3 hours or 4.
So you were there a week early.
Yes.
No. And just to go back a bit, Charlie, as well. So you were in London. When did you leave London?
1981.
And where did you go to then? You came back to Ireland?
Well, I actually bought a camper van when I was in England, you see. So that was my party shot, and they went, buy this, and I took off then. And I think the first, I arrived in Rosslare, I got off the boat there, and I arrived in Ennis that night, and I had a session with John Lyons and Pat Mullins in one of the pubs there, I forget the name of it. And they taught me about this week was on, you see. So I came down anyway to Miltown the day after, and that was it. I was here for about 2 weeks, I'd say.
And then did you settled in East Galway?
Yeah, actually I was in Ormore. I was in Galway City for a while. See, once the winter came, the old camper van wasn't. So I got to stay with Jackie Small actually for a while, and then one thing and another, I lived in Ormore for a while, and then came out to Ardrahan, and that's where I live all the time.
So you're in the heart of Joe Cooley country
yes,
there, really.
Yes.
Just how big a figure is or was Joe Cooley to you?
Huge, yeah, huge.
And what about him is so significant?
You listen to a recording of Joe, and you'll go back over it again. You say, "Oh, jeez, I didn't hear that bit before." You know, he's revealing things all the time. Wonderful heart and soul, and of course the foundation of music is rhythm. So that's what he had in huge amounts.
Yeah, and every time I listen to Joe, there's another variation or another.
Yeah, another
bit of
little subtle note. They were very subtle, you know, things and going on there.
Yeah, and he had lovely versions of tunes.
Lovely,
as well.
The versions were outstanding, you know.
Do you fancy playing another one of Joe's tunes?
Right, okay. Right, what could I do? I could maybe try the Boys of the Lough.
Lovely, yeah, very nice. Lovely, Jerry. Gorgeous. Yeah. What's the second tune?
Miss Monaghan.
Miss Monaghan, that's a lovely version of that as well.
Yeah. Masterpiece, really, of his. Yeah. Perhaps influenced by Michael Corman's, but completely individual.
Yeah. Interpreted on the accordion.
Yeah.
Am I right in saying that you spent time in the States as well, Charlie?
Yeah. I was there quite a few times. Yeah. And my interest in the old music, after 78s and that, so it was always great to investigate and try and find out more. Back then, especially in the early 80s now, that's when I went several times. I'd been at first in the late 70s, but it was big interest for me.
And where in the States would you have gone to?
Well, New York, Boston. Well, the first trip I toured all around, went from New York to Washington, bought a car there and drove all the way down south, down to Florida. Disneyland, I enjoyed that. And came up then to New Orleans, and there was great music there, jazz music and Cajun music and all kinds of things. And then drove right across Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. Came up then through Utah, Montana, right up as far as Montana, I think, and then came down to Los Angeles, Los Angeles, and sold the car then and came home.
So you did the whole tour.
Yeah.
And so you were seeking out different types of music, not just...
Whatever came up, it wasn't, I played as well, but a bit as well, but it was great.
Did you get playing the accordion in Disneyland?
No.
And who were the musicians you would have been mixing with, the traditional musicians in America at that time?
Well, in Washington D.C., there was... No, I remember the time I was there now, Billy McComiskey and Brendan Mulvihill. They weren't around, but there were some other musicians. I forget the names now, but there was some other musicians around that time.
And musicians in New York as well, would you have?
Let me think. Oh yeah, I would have met. I remember we played in Gaelic Park. I think it was Gaelic Park, or the equivalent of Gaelic Park, during the matches or between the matches or something like that. And I remember meeting Johnny Madden there. That was this in the early 80s now, I'd say. Who else did we meet?
Would you have met Billy Caples as well?
Oh, well, that was in Boston, yeah. Oh, yeah. I stayed with Billy. Yeah, I know Billy well.
Yeah, tell me about that experience.
Yeah, that was great because he was the man that I could learn an awful lot from, and he was part of the dancehall scene in Boston, and he'd learned from Michael Hannafin. Michael Hannafin was a barman, and he'd always had a tin whistle under the counter, so when Billy was a young lad, he'd go in and he learned a lot of music from him.
And what would you have learned from Billy then?
Quite a few tunes. I can't remember. Jesus, you're catching me on the hop.
No worries. I suppose he was a kindred spirit in some ways. Your experience playing for the dance halls and similar.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I remember I did a gig with him one time. He used to do these house parties, You just turn up and play, and I went with him. Well, that was an experience.
And what kind of scene was that?
It was just in the homes, in Irish, Boston Irish home, like we'll say. I think I remember it was a Sunday afternoon, kind of thing. Plenty of refreshments and.
Have there been other musicians or just yourselves?
No, it was just the two of us, I think. Yeah.
You brought the party.
Yeah.
And so you've had a lot of different I suppose, musical partnerships over the years and people that you've enjoyed playing with. Talk to me about Des Mulcair.
Yeah, Des. Yeah, well, of course, Des played with Joe in his last 2 years, you know, and so he featured on the record that came out. And I had known Des for a long time before actually we started. Well, a few years anyway before we started playing together. Sometime in the 80s, I'd say. Yeah. Great character, Des. He's a one-man show, like, you know. He's a great flute player, wonderful flute player, and a wonderful singer. And he can tell jokes and yarns to beat the band, like.
And that was easy for you to sit it because he'd play with Cooley. That you
Yeah,
found it very
well, we kind of gravitated to that sort of thing, you know. But played a lot of Joe's tunes, yeah.
And would you have played with Peter Horan as well much?
Oh, I did, yeah. Not a huge amount, because he was in Sligo. But I remember one night we had in this little pub in Mickey Nocton's. It was near Fecal now, not far. And himself and Peter Horan and he had a sidekick who played the bodhrán, you know, and P.J. Hayes and myself. I don't know how I can't remember how we all ended up in that pub anyway, but we played and played till 4 and 5 in the morning, like. But Peter could see us all down, and as far as refreshments went anyway.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
Great man, yeah.
And then it's even up to today. You still play regularly with Niamh Donnelly and Eamon Cotter.
Yeah, and Geraldine. Yeah.
It's a lovely sound that you have together.
Yeah, I really enjoy playing with them. Yeah.
And what is it about their music that you enjoy?
Well, it's all very solid, you know, great tunes, great rhythm. Yeah, we just seem to work out, you know.
Yeah, all the sort of similar interests in the same music.
Yeah.
And then I suppose over in Fecal as well, you'd play regularly as well.
Well, I play with Mark Donlan there. Yeah.
And that's a fantastic session. That's going a while.
Yeah, it's going, and you wouldn't know who'd turn up. Like you know, sometimes there'd be 7 or 8 fiddles or 9 even. Yeah, it's great that way.
Yeah, you're outnumbered.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's no harm.
And Mark's a fantastic fiddle player, soldiering with you in the tulla as
well.
Yeah. Would you play us another tune?
Yeah, okay, I'll try. I think now. These are ones that the Tulla band would have played, especially in Joe Cooley's time.
Lovely.
Tim Moloney and what's known as Cooley's Reel, and I'm not sure the name of the third one, but it's West Clare Reel or something.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Charlie. Brilliant.
So that's an old Tulla and Joe Cooley selection, I think you would say.
Yeah, brilliant tunes. So, not only are you a fine accordion player, you also do accordion repairs and tuning.
Yes.
How did you get started with that?
I'd say mostly out of curiosity, you know. I kind of the mind where I want to find out how something works, or, you know, or I used to anyway.
Do you remember the first accordion you started to repair?
Yeah, I think, you know, reeds, you see, used to go on, and it was very difficult to find but somebody to repair it, you know. But in England then there was Nielsen in London, there was Vincent Tighe in Coventry, and a few more, Willie Daniker and Honers in London. So I'd take it apart myself, but you know, I'd try and get things going. But when I eventually found them, those people, I learned a lot from them, you know, by just listening and watching.
So you would have gone into their workshops?
Yes.
And how many years are you repairing accordions for?
Well, if I started doing my tinkering around with my own stuff in the late 70s, I'd say. So 45 years maybe, something like that.
50 years, yeah.
Maybe 50, yeah.
And so what? Because the accordions that I've listened to that you've tuned have quite a distinct sound. Do you know?
Right.
Do you know, have you something in mind when you're tuning it?
Well, like there's endless ways of doing it. Like, you know, I mean, you see, take this box, it has 3 sets of reeds. So we'll just say one is in concert pitch, and there'll be one offset sharp and one offset flat. So that gives a kind of a, so that depends how flat and how sharp, that changes the thing, you know.
But you don't have a specific sound in mind when you're tuning, is it just depend on the accordion?
Or the customer, you know, I mean, they want certain sounds of, yeah. I don't like them too dry personally, but, you know, I want to sound like an accordion, you know.
But you would do it if someone asked you to?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's,
tell me about that single row there.
Yes.
You brought in with it. Where's it from? What's the story with it?
Yeah, well, Dan Smith had that, and he left County Galway sometime in the 20s. He went to England first, and he worked as a coal miner. And then he went to the States around 1927, I think. And I would say that he got that in the early 30s. But he would have had to work hard to save up for that, I'd imagine. Yeah.
And how did it end up in your hands then?
Well, strange, because the box he played when I knew him, I didn't know he had that, or that he'd ever had that. But he had a later Walters that he got in 1949. And that's the one I knew. So when he died, a niece or something, I think a niece, but got it, but who doesn't play at all, so it will probably never be seen again. But I think it was just before I was around 60, and Tom Cusson rang me. So there's a lady who has one of Dan Smith's accordions, and she can't play anymore. So I said, "Oh, great!" You know, I was astounded because I didn't know that he had that. But he'd given it to her, I think, when she was very young. When he came back from America, she'd taken an interest anyway, and so that's how I got it, basically. You know, but it was great to have a box like that from somebody I knew, and I used to go to him quite a lot, you know.
I just love to have that personal connection
Yes,
with the instrument.
yes. Yeah.
And what's it like to play compared to more modern instruments?
Yeah, well, like the sound is tremendous, you know. And it's a bit of a Rolls Royce. I mean, people would find it a bit heavy in the springs, you know, to play. But you know, you get used to those things. But
it's a great sound, the sound of a particular era, isn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah. How's that? 20s and 30s, 40s sound, yeah.
So we're here at Scoil Willie Clancy. How important is this week?
Yeah, it's very, very important, yeah. The ethos is passing on the music, and especially from Clare. But, and it was never a sort of commercial thing like pubs or that. That wasn't the most important thing at all. It was the classes, really. Yeah. And I was honoured then to be asked to teach when they started the accordion, which was 1985 or 86, I can't remember now. So I put down 34 years anyway teaching. And then 2019, I think it was, I was the last year I taught.
And you've been running the classes this week?
Yeah, I just came from 3 classes there. No, 4, yeah.
And that's a different experience for you, I suppose, as well?
Yeah, it took me a while to get used to doing that, because I don't, it's hard to go in, just go cold into a room and full of people and start playing away like. But it's grand. It's grand, I think they appreciate a bit of a break.
And so the teachers as well as the
yes,
students.
Yes, especially towards the end of the week.
So, how do you see? You've been repairing accordions for over 40 years and shooting.
Yeah.
How do you see that landscape now? Do you see another generation coming to do that work?
Well, yes, I think there's interest. Yeah.
And do you think you're confident that'll be carried on into the future?
I'd say, I'd say so. Yeah.
Have you doubts about it?
No, it's just a matter of time getting the experience. There's not too much experience there yet, but.
Yeah, I suppose because the likes of yourself, you've been doing it for years, and John Brosnan.
John, he's retiring it up as well. Yeah.
So it's
So
important.
there's Conor Connolly and there's Fikram Philibin, yeah, and there's other people who seem to be interested as well.
And on the whole, how do you see the state of traditional music today? Do you think it's in a good place?
Oh, indeed, yeah, indeed. And what I love to see is an interest in the old music. I mean, you can forge ahead, but you have to look behind as well. You have to have the rear view mirror. Like.
And do you think the younger generation are carrying that forward?
Yes, yeah, in many cases, yeah. There should be more of it, but maybe. But that, to me, that's where my inspirations are in that. But maybe I look back too much. But I think you have to do a certain amount of that, definitely.
You have to look to the greats.
You have to look, yeah, and the source, the source, yeah.
I might get you to play one more tune before we finish up.
Yeah.
If you'd be up for that. But
Okay.
one more question for you. What is it about traditional music that you love?
It's the rhythm, the musicality, but to me the rhythm is the thing. That's the foundation. I remember one old lad, he played melodeon, and I remember he said, I play with my feet, he said. That was great to say. There was the rhythm, yeah. And that's what I enjoy. That's why I enjoy playing in the band too, because it really emphasises that.
It's the rhythm that keeps you going.
Yeah.
Great. We might play one more.
Yeah.
Finish
Okay.
up,
Yeah.
That'll be us
Yeah.
next week, Charlie.
Yeah. So,
Lovely.
yeah, I forgot to mention some people, you know. I forgot to mention Jack Doyle and what was it?
Yeah, is there anyone? Sorry, is there anything else you'd like to say before we finish up?
Well, I'd like to mention Jack.
And who was Jack?
Jack Doyle was from Camp, County Kerry, and he went to America in 1947, and he would have met Peter Conlon. Now, and that was a tune of Peter Conlon's, which is also he was also a huge influence on my music when I heard his records in the 70s now. And Jack, he went in 47, and nearly the first night he was there, he was brought to some party anyway, and who was playing only Peter Conlon, so he was a big influence on Jack. And later on, Jack got a Baldoni made, but he wanted it with the 8 sets of reeds, and that's what Conlon had, you see. So I have that box now as well, which is nice. It's lovely to have. Jack was a great source of music for me, and lower about the tales about the lives there at the time. Yeah.
That's great. Right, we cut there.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Charlie.
Thanks yourself.